Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of my What If series. And this is part 2 of What If I Was Showrunner for the upcoming Harry Potter series that's coming to HBO in 2027. Now, in part 1, I covered what I would do as showrunner for season 1. This is now what I would do as showrunner for season 2 and how I would structure it. So, how would I structure season 2 of the upcoming Harry Potter TV series? To be based on the second book in the series, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets? Well, stick with me and I'll tell you what I'll do. So, let's go first into episode 1 of this season. Now, well, actually, first, how many episodes would I personally pick to adapt the story? We'll stick with 8 for now, because it's only slightly longer than The Philosopher's Stone as a book. So, in episode 1, then, how would I structure the season going forward? Okay, so, being the season premiere, I would structure episode 1 as a over triple length episode, actually. A near 2-hour episode to kick the season off, which adapts the first 3 chapters of the book. Those books would be The Worst Birthday, those chapters even, would be The Worst Birthday, Dobby's Warning, and The Burrow. So, the first act of the episode would adapt chapter 1 of the book, which would detail Harry's birthday and the Dursleys getting ready on this day for a dinner party with some rich builder and his wife, the Masons, not caring at all for Harry's birthday, and Harry getting into trouble for threatening Dudley with magic, even though he hasn't actually done any. And seeing the tennis ball shaped eyes in the hedges, and Dudley taunting him about not having any friends at Hogwarts. So, pretty much an act that will play verbatim of the first chapter. Going into chapter 2 in the second act, Dobby's Warning, where we see Harry being warned against returning to Hogwarts because there's a plot to make most terrible things happen. And this would all culminate in Harry receiving the letter from the Ministry reminding him about how he's not allowed to use magic outside Hogwarts while he's under 17, so while he's underage. And this reveals that law to the Dursleys, which he had kept quiet until this point. And it would end with Harry being locked up in his room with bars on his window, following the pudding fiasco, which, contrary to what the film tells you, is not a cake. No, it's not. It's a violet and plum pudding. So, it would have to be that for this. So, like a violet pudding. And then chapter 3 would be where Ron, Fred and George come and rescue him from his prison and take him to the Burrow, which is where we're introduced to Ginny for the first time, properly. And Arthur Weasley comes in just as breakfast is about to start, and we actually see the denoming of the garden, which was cut out of the film. And we get to see Harry's week with the Dursleys, or is it month with the Dursleys, leading up to the return to Hogwarts. Really, this episode would have to end on them getting ready to go to Diagon Alley to get their school supplies and books for the coming term. Leaving us on a nice cliffhanger with Harry ending up at Borgin and Burke's. And our first meeting with Lucius Malfoy, which happens at Borgin and Burke's in the book, not at Flourish and Blotts. So, yeah. Leading us into episode 2. Now, here's how I would structure episode 2 of this season. I would do the 3-act structure once again, but this time the 3-act structure would adapt chapters 4 to 6 of the book. So yes, we're getting into some of the stuff now. And those chapters would be At Flourish and Blots, The Whomping Willow, and Gilderoy Lockhart. Act 1 of the episode would adapt chapter 4, At Flourish and Blots. This basically would feature them going to Diagon Alley to buy the school supplies, and would have the full altercation between Arthur Weasley and Lucius Malfoy at Flourish and Blotts, where they have the fight which Hagrid has to intervene and force them apart from each other. And it's also where Lucius Malfoy slips the diary into Ginny's cauldron. And of course, in the book, this happens a few days after Harry's 12th birthday, not on the first day of term, as the film would have you believe. Now we lead into Act 2, which would adapt Chapter 5, The Whomping Willow. Now this would be Harry and Ron getting stuck on platform 9 3/4 after the barrier seals itself shut, and having to use the flying Ford Anglia to get themselves to Hogwarts, which then leads to them crashing into the Whomping Willow and nearly getting expelled. And as I said before, the film puts Flourish and Blotts and this together. They happen nearly a month apart from each other in the book, so here we'll have to keep that in. Now, this is also at the point where we're going to learn that Ginny's also in Gryffindor, and it will segue us in nicely to Act 3, which will adapt Chapter 6, where Gilderoy Lockhart, which is where he teaches them about Cornish pixies in Defense Against the Dark Arts, or does he? He gives him a quiz about himself first, and then shows him the Cornish pixies. Yeah, that's how it happens in the book. And it's also at breakfast in this scene where we meet Colin Creevey and first hear of the howler, the screaming red letter that Ron receives, giving him a bollocking for stealing the flying car. And also during this chapter, if I'm not mistaken, we also get the first herbology class, where they're learning about mandrakes. So this is where the plot starts to fall into play. And of course, Gilderoy Lockhart going around telling other teachers how to do their jobs. Oh boy, do they love that. No, of course they don't. I'm being sarcastic. Okay. So that's where episode 2 would end. With them in their first herbology class. And it would actually end on a cliffhanger that leads us into the next episode, which will adapt. Yeah, chapter 7 gets its own episode the way I would structure it. Now, chapter 7 in the book is Mudbloods and Murmurs. This is actually where Oliver Wood wakes his entire team up to go and practice out in the to go and practice Quidditch, and where they are stopped by the Slytherins, who need the pitch to train Draco Malfoy as their new Seeker. And this is an important chapter in the book, guys. When Draco calls Hermione a mudblood, it's supposed to have the reaction of, how dare you, from Alicia Spinnet, and the entire Gryffindor team are angry with him. And Fred and George are supposed to try jumping on him. And Marcus Flint is supposed to defend him from there. And then, of course, as we know, it culminates in Ron belching up slugs after a spell goes wrong. He tries to curse Malfoy to eat slugs, and he ends up doing so himself. And the exposition of what a mudblood is actually comes from Ron in the book. Not Hermione. She's not supposed to know what a mudblood is at this stage, having never been exposed to the term before. Whereas the films actually had her knowing what the word meant, despite that being her first time for hearing it. So, to be true to the book, she has to not know what it means, and Ron has to give us that bit of lore. And during History of Magic, Professor Binns is the one who tells them about the legend of the Chamber of Secrets. After once again, Hermione asks him. Now, this is where we should get an actual visual flashback to the founders of Hogwarts, founding the school, and the whole events leading up to the creation of the Chamber of Secrets. So we're doing that right now. I think I put that in a bit too early, actually. So Mudbloods and Murmurs. The episode ends, and then we get into episode 4, the mid-season finale. I think should adapt chapters 8 to 10. So that's how I would structure it, in that way. The 3-act structure with each act of the episode adapting one chapter. Now, these chapters in the book are called The Death Day Party, The Writing on the Wall, and The Rogue Bludger. So, with that information dump, Act 1 would adapt Chapter 8, The Death Day Party. And this is set at Halloween during this year at Hogwarts. And Harry, Ron, and Hermione attend Nearly Headless Nick's Death Day party after Nick got Harry out of going to detention for tracking mud through the halls of Hogwarts, which is actually where episode 7 should end off. Leading into this chapter, Harry's promise to attend the party. And this is actually where we're supposed to meet Moaning Myrtle, not the girls' toilets during the brewing of the Polyjuice potion. That comes later. Okay. um, um, and it is actually also where we meet the members of the Headless Hunt for the first time. They are supposed to come in here, as Harry actually tries to talk their leader into letting Nick join. Because as we know, Nearly Headless Nick is only partially beheaded. And that doesn't qualify him for membership. And as we know, it is actually when they're on their way back to the feast, or their common room, after that party, that leads them into the corridor, which is where Chapter 9 takes place. And this is where the first petrification is discovered. Mrs. Norris. And this is where Harry is accused of killing the cat, despite him not being anywhere near the vicinity when it happened. And yes, this was before we learn what we learned during the dueling club, because that hasn't happened yet at this point in the story. And how what Professor Snape and Dumbledore says gets them off the hook. And this is where it will be important. Because it is also where we discover the first instance of the writing on the wall about the Chamber of Secrets and any enemies of the air beware. This is then what culminates in Hermione asking Professor Binns about the Chamber of Secrets during History of Magic. So this is where it should take place, not in episode 7 like I previously said. Sorry. Okay. um and of course Act 3 should then take place during the Quidditch match, where we see the Rogue Bludger trying to knock Harry off his broom. only for him to still win the match, but obviously he gets hit by the bludger, breaking his arm in the process. This is what causes Gilderoy Lockhart to then use a spell to, instead of regrowing or mending the arm, or his wrist actually, it debones it. Now, at this scene in the film is where we get my favourite Hagrid line in the whole series. Broken! There's no bones left! We have to leave that in for this. We have to leave that in for this adaptation. Okay. Like, there's no way I'm taking it out. No, no, and no again. Okay. And so this lands Harry in the hospital wing, having his bones regrown using Skelligrow, which, yes, is part of how the Potter family made its fortune. Yeah, so and this has to end in Colin Creevey being brought up to the hospital wing after being petrified. And Dobby's confession that it was he who's been doing all this stuff to try and deter Harry from coming back to Hogwarts. So that's where this episode would end. On to episode 5. Mid-season premiere time, guys. Episode 5, as I would structure it, would cover chapters, or would adapt chapters 11 and 12. These chapters in the book are called The Dueling Club and The Polyjuice Potion. And it'd be an episode of 2 halves. Part 1 would adapt chapter 11, The Dueling Club. This is where Gilderoy Lockhart introduces the Dueling Club for the first time. And it, more importantly, is where we learn Harry's ability to speak Parseltongue. It's where we learn that for the first time. He can speak Parseltongue. And he uses it to try and get a snake away from Justin Finch Fletchley that's been conjured out of Draco's wand. This leads the whole school to suspect him of being the one behind the opening of the Chamber of Secrets. And he even starts to question this himself. By this point in the story, they actually have learned about the legend of the Chamber of Secrets, by the way, so they already know about Salazar Slytherin and the Chamber of Secrets, and this is where they come up with their plan to interrogate Malfoy, leading us in to chapter 12, part 2 of the episode, The Polyjuice Potion. Set during Christmas, and then it's about them brewing the Polyjuice Potion to turn into Crabbe and Goyle to go off and interrogate Malfoy about the Chamber of Secrets, because they suspect his father of being the one to be opening the chamber. They're not wrong in that regard, they're half right. He was responsible for slipping the diary into Ginny Weasley's cauldron earlier in the story. But they're suspecting Draco of being the heir of Slytherin. And they're shocked to learn that they're wrong about this. And to learn that Lucius Malfoy has a whole room of dark artifacts hidden underneath the floor of their home. In their... Whoa, yeah, in their basement then. Okay. And this is also where we learn that Hermione's polyjuice turned her into a cat face. And yes, regardless of what the film tells you about the polyjuice potion, it doesn't just turn you into the physical appearance of the person you're turning into. It also gives you their vocal cords. So it's supposed to change your voice to theirs. And this would have been something that could easily have been achieved in the films if they've just had the Crabbe and Goyle actors dubbing their lines over Harry and Ron. It wouldn't have been too difficult to achieve. But with proper lip syncing and everything. What a Christmas, huh? Okay. So we now go into episode 6. So, episode 6 will adapt chapter 13 of the book, which is called The Very Secret Diary, which is where we learn that it was Tom Riddle's old school diary. And it's also where we learn, thanks to a memory that we actually see during this chapter, that the Chamber of Secrets was opened 50 years earlier, which we already know, and that a young Tom Riddle, who was only 16 at the time, was a prefect, and we learn that this was how Moaning Myrtle died. She was attacked by the monster. And we also learn that Hagrid was the one who opened the Chamber of Secrets. Come on! No, he didn't. Okay. That's what we're led to believe here, though. And Dumbledore doesn't believe Tom Riddle about it. And because of all the dangers going on, he's not allowed to stay at Hogwarts over the summer. Because he grew up in a Muggle orphanage. And this becomes important down the line, so don't be forgetting that. Okay. And so, with that being firmly in place now, that knowledge, this episode would have to end just as Harry and Ron are going to ask Hagrid about it. And that will lead us into episode 7. Okay, now the exciting part here, the first of a 2-part season finale. Episode 7 would adapt, in my eyes, chapters 14 through 16 of the book. And those chapters, in case you need a refresher or a reminder, in the book are called Cornelius Fudge, Aragog, and the Chamber of Secrets. You know, the thing in the title of the book. Yeah, there you go. um, um, and so it'd be a 3-act structure, each act adapting one chapter. Act 1 would be the adaptation of Chapter 14, where we meet Cornelius Fudge for the first time, as he comes to arrest Hagrid in his suspect and opening of the Chamber of Secrets and attacks on the Muggleborns. So the same thing happens to him 50 years after it originally happened. He's become the scapegoat once again. He's sent to Azkaban as a suspect, but is told he'll be let out with an apology if they catch the real culprit, and it turns out not to be him. And this is also where Dumbledore is forcibly removed from the school as well, at the insistence of Lucius Malfoy and the rest of the school governors. Boo! And this would then lead us into Act 2, which would adapt Chapter 15, Aragog, which is where Harry and Ron go into the Forbidden Forest to talk to Aragog, where the Acromantula, where we learn that he's not the monster and Hagrid is innocent. So, yeah, directly after we see him get arrested as a suspect in the crime, he's completely cleared. So, he's not the one doing this. He's not opening the Chamber of Secrets. It's not Aragog who's attacking the Muggleborns. And then Harry and Ron must escape the forest with the aid of the flying car again when the spiders try to eat them. And, well, guess what, guys? Act 3 goes into Chapter 16, the Chamber of Secrets, and this is where Harry and Ron learn that Ginny has been taken down into the Chamber of Secrets, and to everyone's surprise, well, we learn that in the next episode, in the next chapter anyway. So they go and enlist Gilderoy Lockhart's help with going in to rescue Ginny, because he's been boasting that he knows all along where the Chamber of Secrets is, or where the entrance to it is, at least. And this is where Harry's ability to speak Parseltongue becomes important. Yeah, there you go. Because we get into the season finale next, the actual crux of the story, in episode 8. So this season finale would be a game of two halves once again, as it adapts chapters 17 and 18 of the book, The Heir of Slytherin and Dobby's Reward. With part 1 adapting chapter 17. Now they've entered the Chamber of Secrets here. They're about to enter it. Harry's ability to speak Parseltongue is now important in the situation, as he needs to speak to the entrance to get it to open. And once inside and he's trying to rescue Ginny, this is after Gilderoy Lockhart tried to, because he's outed himself to them as a fraud at this point, and he needs to remove their memories and claim victory over this whole ordeal. But where he picks up and uses Ron's broken wand, he ends up removing his own memory. Yeah! Okay. And so Harry goes on to rescue Ginny, and this is where we find out that under Tom Riddle's influence, she's the one who's been attacking the Muggleborns all year. She's the one who's been opening the Chamber of Secrets and setting the basilisk loose. And we know what all of this culminates in. an epic final battle between Harry Potter and Voldemort. Well, the memory of Tom Riddle, actually. And the destruction of the first Horcrux, the diary. Now, of course, we don't know it's a Horcrux at this point, and we don't even know what Horcruxes are at this point in the story. So the diary is destroyed thanks to Harry and the aid of Fawkes the Phoenix for blinding the basilisk, and the destruction of the diary itself with Gryffindor's sword, which Harry, moments before, used to kill the basilisk. So it's impregnated with basilisk venom. Harry's wound is healed by Phoenix Tears, obviously Fawkes crying on it, which we learn earlier after Harry sent to see Dumbledore after the attacks of Penelope Clearwater, Nearly Headless Nick, and Justin Finch Fletchley. I should have pointed that out earlier. And so this all culminates in Chapter 18, Dobby's Reward, which, of course, is Dobby getting set free, accidentally, of course, when Harry puts a sock in the diary, and it ends up, well, first he gives it back to Lucius Malfoy, and then it's given to Dobby. So, and no, Lucius Malfoy does not attempt to murder Harry with the Avada Kedavra curse in the book. That was a film only. Yeah, that was a film only scene. As is the Don't Worry, I Will Be. That was film only between Daniel Radcliffe and Jason Isaacs. We want to end this season the same way the book ends. So back to platform 9 3/4, back to Harry going home with the Dursleys. But we have a little bit of setup for the third season. A little wink, wink, nudge, nudge thing. So all ends very happily. And that is how I would structure season 2 of the Harry Potter series if I was the showrunner. There will be one of these for season 3 eventually. But until then, if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and have us a magical time.